Imagine knowing exactly what your students are learning and exactly which steps you need to take next.
Join us in Down with the Reading Quiz to craft meaningful and productive formative assessments that move away from gotcha moments of basic recall and toward assessing what your students actually can do.
In this 30-minute free masterclass, we'll share 3 powerful assessment keys that work for any novel at any time of the year.
Head to shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to sign up, and we'll also send you a free workbook to keep track of all your notes.
Once again, that's shop.bravenewteaching.com/masterclass to nail formative assessments forever.
Well, hello and welcome back to Brave New Teaching, and welcome to Camp BNT 2024.
Woo-hoo! We're here, baby.
It's summer. It's summer camp, and it's basically our summer camp book club. That is where we are at. Yes. So I know I talked about this last week's episode when we were talking about our first book choice of Camp BNT, which was PD book, Liz Klein-Rock's Start Here, Start Now. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, I highly suggest you do so. Today we're talking about, we've basically taken the genre approach this year to Camp BNT, and we are quite liking it. Today we are making a hard turn away from PD books and into comics and graphic adaptations and graphic novels. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the graphic adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and adapted and illustrated by Joel Christian Gill. And we actually had the pleasure of being able to interview them a couple of weeks ago. That interview will air on the podcast in the fall. But this book, the graphic adaptation, is pretty newly released. And so we got to talk to them about the process of adapting it for like a graphic, what does he call it? A graphic history?
Graphic
history of racist ideas in America. I just feel like the words graphic history are just so rich and cool because I'm a nerd with linguistics. But yeah, we're excited to talk today about just graphic adaptations, graphic novels, and comics, period. And then specifically the graphic adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning is it's so good, and it's so much, and it's so applicable and useful in a classroom setting.
It is 278 pages. And I think you could do a page a day and still be behind and never make it through in an entire school year, all that's here to unpack.
Well, 180 days, you'd be out.
I mean, true.
Yeah.
It's just so dense and so powerful. And I think that's one of the things we wanted to talk about today is, first of all, graphic fiction, graphic novels, graphic histories. They're lacking in our curriculum. And sometimes that's because we haven't had the time to sit down and chat with Marie and Amanda, or sit down with a good friend, or have the right recommendation come across our desk. Yeah. And so that's a really big part of today, is this just might be the right recommendation at the right time. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about some stuff that Marie has thoughts for putting into her curriculum right away for next year in her American Lit class.
Absolutely. So we are ready to rock and roll, people. But first we have to do a little something. Are we ready for it? I think we are. Cue the music.
You're listening to Brave New Teaching, and we are so much more than a podcast.
We give teachers the inspiration, support, and tools to challenge the status quo.
I'm Amanda, and I'm a former English teacher from Illinois.
And I'm Marie, and I'm a teacher from Southern California.
Join us at bravenewteaching.com to find out more about our courses, festivals, and get every episode's show notes.
We're so glad you're here. Enjoy the show. That graphic novels are not something that I have put into my curriculum as much as I would like to be able to say that I have, simply because, well, there's a few different things. Adopting any new literature is difficult, and then it's like really expensive. And that, honestly, it has been cost prohibitive to me to include any graphic novels like class-wide in my classroom. I have not been able to do so. I'm also kind of embarrassed to admit that, like, I don't know why I didn't think of then just use shorter comics, like political cartoons.
Yeah.
I could be using series of political cartoons from various publications throughout history. And for some reason, it just didn't really dawn on me until our conversation with Dr. Kendi and Professor Gill, who like wrote and adapted this for the graphic adaptation. Like, I was like, oh,
Adoy.
I used to use political cartoons all the time in like older units that I would teach, and I don't know where they went in my brain space, but there is absolutely a place in all of our curriculum and all of our units somewhere within each term or semester for different graphic texts.
Yeah, there is. I was like, wait, what is she trying to
I know. You're
say?
looking at me like, what was the rest of that sentence? And then I believe that was it.
Okay.
Because she just stopped talking.
The sentence is over. Okay. So there is. I think that there is a place for them. And so Marie and I, one of the things we were talking about is that I think, and this is something that I've talked a lot about on my Mud and Ink work with close reading. I've talked a lot about recently that the fact of the matter is curriculums in the majority of the United States change slowly. Texts are adopted slowly with much vetting and in a lot of places with much resistance, right? Getting full class texts adopted and distributed and purchased to all kids, this is a process. But the supplemental game is strong. And I think that that's exactly where graphic novels come in, especially if you haven't yet taken the leap to have an entire unit dedicated to graphic novels. And so I was actually just reading George Takei's They Call Us Enemy, which is a wonderful graphic novel. It's a graphic adaptation of a memoir. And I had a lot of the same reactions to that I had here to Stamped, in that I think what we can learn from graphic novels is not necessarily the entire story arc, but is how to read visuals, right? Like Marie was kind of just saying with political cartoons. And the skill of how to read visuals is different in a single political cartoon as it is in like a graphic history about racism in America, as it's different about being in a memoir about your life. So I think that that's kind of where I was really taken by Stamped from the beginning, is the content of reading Stamped, whether you're reading the original, the kids adaptation, the YA adaptation, it is heavy, it is challenging, and it is uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people to wrestle with. And so the thought of taking some of these ideas and concepts that are challenging and making them visual, that is not only a powerful opportunity for us as readers and adults, but for our students who might hear about these concepts, but not emotionally feel them or attach to them or really understand the weight of what's being discussed.
There's like a closeness, or like a,
Yes.
I don't know what I'm trying to, I don't know exactly how I'm trying to say, but like Amanda's saying it, there's a difference between experiencing history through words, even through maybe a movie, and being able to say like, that's, well, yeah, but that was then, and this is now. And then there's looking at like this graphic history that is drawn in a very contemporary fashion that looks like, you know, like it looks like the stuff that kids look at now, because it is stuff like that just people look at now. And it's spanning hundreds of years, and it's really confronting visually the fact that, yes, these racist ideas and racism, there is an inception at the beginning of like, you know, a nation, really. And then look at how far, and also not how far we've come, because all of the visuals look the same through the arc of the entire book. Is what I'm saying making sense?
It is making sense. So, yes. So let's
it's easy to step back from written text. I think it's easier to step back from the words. I mean, I just think about myself in history class going,
yes.
Okay. And like, that was so long ago. And it was like the 70s. And I was in the 90s, and it was not that long ago. But to me, it was so long ago. And there's something about the way specifically that Stamped has been put together that you can really see and feel the proximity of history because it's all strung together visually. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
It does. Okay, so there's one example that I was thinking about when I was talking. There's a couple. There's several. But one of them is in the piece on pages like 79 through 81 or so. There's this example of a woman whose African body and her buttocks and genitals were large compared to other women of her area, right? And so like this became a obsession and fascination with Europeans, so much so that an opera was inspired by her. And so in this opera, the storyline's been crafted so that this white woman, in order to be attractive to this man that she wants to be with, she wants to appear as this Black woman that they're obsessed with in the culture. And so she puts on blackface. She accentuates the size of her body and her buttocks and her breasts. And like, okay, so like you could read about this, right? But if you look at the graphic novel, you see this woman painting herself Black. You see her changing her body and this like comical yowza from the other, her pursuer. And then the next frame says, like, once she's entrapped him, surprise, it's me.
She's she's wiping the blackface off and it's like, haha, surprise, it's me. And he's like, brr. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much there to unpack that I know as a reader, I would have read and comprehended, but like to this level of nuance, tone, and experience really missed. And I think that goes so much so even for our students. And this is horrifying, but even worse and even, kind of going through the rest of the history, I mean, there are depictions in this book of lynching, depictions of some of the brutal behaviors that happened during slavery. I mean, things that we, I think, try to not think about because they're so terrible and so horrible, but in the graphic history, you are confronted with them. And so while we might need to pick and choose depending on like what's developmentally appropriate for our students, there's a different conversation that's going to happen looking at the graphic history than reading the book. And I think that the opportunities, I don't know, Marie's got a couple of ideas. I think that there are a lot of things that can be done, but this is, to me, fascinating. And I think the last thing I'd say about that too is maybe like the atrocities is not what we need to see in certain classes in certain areas of our curriculum, but on pages like 138 and 139, and this happens a lot of other places too. There are a lot of places where like the metaphorical or like analogy types of writing are made visual, right? So there's like there's a story that Abraham Lincoln is telling about sheeps and wolves, and that's kind of like the difference between liberty and tyranny, right? So it kind of makes these concepts that were part of what we're trying to craft in that history, right? Brings them to this very visual level that I think maybe was kind of hard for kids to picture. What is liberty and what is tyranny? Well, here you go. It's a sheep and it's a wolf. And we can really see that unpacked differently in this adaptation than we can when we read it.
Yes. And like Amanda was saying before, there are 280, is that what you said? 280
yes.
pages that are jam-packed with cells and like smaller cartoons that link together into larger cartoons. And it's both amazingly easy because you can find something everywhere, and difficult because it is so expertly woven. Like the history is woven so well to show like in the blink of an eye, you're in a more contemporary setting when you've just been looking at like 1700s France, right? Like it's very well crafted in that way. It's expertly crafted. But like, for instance, in my American literature class, which is 11th grade English, I start the year with a mini unit where we look at some foundational documents. And I kind of change the way that I do it, but like the most constant pieces that we look at while exploring the question, what is America's story and who gets to tell it? We look at some different documents that are part of the United States, like foundation with founding fathers, et cetera. And we do like a whole, what do you know about revolutionary and American independence history? We just kind of use that as like a starting, as a jumping off point, not a starting point. That's like me not using my words correctly. We look at the preamble to the Constitution. We look at the Bill of Rights. We look at the Declaration of Independence, and we do rhetorical analyses of these different documents, specifically looking at just the triangle, just speaker, audience, and message, and like the connections between those 3 points. If I were to take one single cell from this whole book and use that as performing another rhetorical analysis. So the second chapter of Stamped from the Beginning, the graphic history, is called Thomas Jefferson. And if I look at page 56, Amanda, are you with me?
I'm with you.
There is a cell at the bottom, and it takes up almost half the page. And depicted in there is appearing to be a woman, a Black woman with like a little bonnet on, and 3 little kids. There's one little white kid in the middle and 2 Black kids standing next to that one kiddo. And then like next to them in the same cell are 2 indigenous peoples and a little bit older, the same white kid. And then you keep going over, and then it's like going through time, right? And there's like it looks like a stern father talking to this like now pubescent like white kid who's having his shoes or something done by a Black man. And like the trajectory of the cell and the way that the text goes, it's basically like years later, these are the different things that like a young Thomas Jefferson learned as here's like in the middle. As he grew up, Cherokee diplomats often visited his home. Jefferson contrasted these distinguished guests with the African people who tended his family's every need in the home and field. And then it's like the dad's or the father saying, a man's got to be independent and pull himself up by his bootstraps, son. And then the next like little bubble quote is, here are your bootstraps, Master Jefferson, as he's like tying them on for him and giving it to, and it's simply doing a rhetorical analysis of this cell alone would be such rich conversation.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And then like put right next to Thomas Jefferson penning the Declaration of Independence.
Oh my gosh. Any American values conversation, this is part of it, right? The whole idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I mean, that is still so, I mean, my last day of the classroom, it was spring of 2021, and I had kids still arguing that, but Miss Cardenas, I'm working so hard. I've had hardships too. And I think that this example you just found, and of course we've said there are so many more in this book, but I think this is a great place to say, look at it.
What does that mean?
Look at it.
Yes.
Stop, like we need to stop reading about it because we're kind of reading in circles on certain points, right?
Sure, and talking in circles, and it's easier to ignore, or it's easier to not even like drown out, but just water into the rest of our understanding of history. Like, well, yeah, but that was then. Right? Like there's such an easier that was then. Yes, that was then. And look at it.
Well, yeah, great. Because in this case, and which is also really nice, like this is about Thomas Jefferson. This is not about you, right? In this study, in this analysis. But we can't ignore that the bootstraps were in fact not entirely up to him by himself.
Yeah, he's not tying his own bootstraps there.
He's not.
Yes, let me find, there's another couple. I mean, there's this whole, I really kept finding more and more in this whole Thomas Jefferson section because there's like all these little, what are they called? Call outs?
Yes.
With various American founding fathers, which I just find fascinating and like rife with conversation, opportunities for conversation, especially when it comes down, like I can only think through what is America's story and who gets to tell it, this lens, because I think that it's a great way just to help students have, we talk a lot of times about being so narrow in our focus, and then all of a sudden you pan left or pan right. This is something I talk about when we're looking at The Great Gatsby with my students. Like we're watching what is it, lunch or dinner? Where are they sitting? Where he starts going on about the dominant race or the whatever.
Where Tom's being
going
so
on and on. Yeah. It's their
charming.
First dinner together. And I like to point out to my students, we always pause and I say, okay, hold, in your fingers, like the little frame of the camera. And you're looking at Tom and you're looking at everybody at the table. And now I want you to pan up and around the whole table.
Yeah.
they're not the only ones in this room. Like, who else is in this room listening to this man spew hate and like perpetuate oppression? Like, who else is there? And this is another like pan left moment of just like pan down to who is actually like tying on those proverbial bootstraps. It's a great way to just also be able to pose a question and let students digest, think about it a little bit, make connections to other pieces of history and real life and their own observations and their own understandings and experiences, right? And then come back in for conversation.
I think this sets up a really cool opportunity as well. Like, I think especially with the Founding Fathers section, if you're going to do this in an American Lit class, is doing a gallery walk or a carousel activity where you've got, right, photocopy the cells that you want to discuss, put them around the room and let the kids kind of do a walkthrough. I think, again, like that's kind of what's so cool about having a graphic history is like, you don't have to do this book in any order. You can use the pieces as you need them and where you need them. And you can combine them in different ways to serve right the EQ or the text that you're doing.
To supplement and to support various texts that you're looking at, right? And I love the idea of using individual cells, larger chunks to do a rhetorical analysis.
Yes.
Because it also takes away the idea of like, we're always going to be met, unfortunately, especially in this time and place in history where we are in our political landscape, we're going to be met with, you're making, these people, you're making the white kids feel bad about being white. Like that's something that I have seen many, many times in many, many areas. And approaching material like Stamped with a strategy of rhetorical analysis allows exposure to other ideas, exposure to ideas that deviate from what we have traditionally had in our American curriculum and in our education in a way that is less threatening to those very tightly held ideals. And those very like just chokehold on, but this is the truth. Okay, let's take a look at what another highly respected, incredibly intelligent, and widely understood expert in the field of American history, how they tell that story, right? And then being able to look at it, look at the speaker, look at the audience, look at the message. It helps to alleviate some of that pressure, I think. Last week we were talking about Start Here, Start Now. And one of the strategies we took away from that PD book for Camp BNT was all about having holding space for difficult conversations in your classroom. This is a specific material where difficult conversations are inherent. And so here's an approach to it to be able to still allow people to have their own critical thinking and like space to be able to make their own decisions and understand things and put things side by side. So let's look at the life of Thomas Jefferson as depicted here in this cell or the series of cells. And let's look at the speaker, audience, and message from this text. And then let's also look at the Declaration of Independence. Speaker, audience, message. And let's see what kind of a conversation we can have about that. Because that's very interesting.
Well, and this is not necessarily related to Stamped from the beginning, but I think this just emphasizes the need for rhetorical analysis to be something that we are spiraling earlier and earlier and earlier in our curriculums. And now we have even more tools to do that with, right? Like, I think that's so vital that the first time kids do rhetorical analysis shouldn't be 11th grade.
Well, and just what a great life skill to be able to my 8-year-old comes home from school sometimes and she's like, blah, 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 said blah, blah, blah. And they said, I said blah, right? Like the whole blah, blah, blah drama mill starts pretty young with our kids, and to be able to help them be a little bit more savvy with the consumption of even that kind of information to say, well, who said that? Why do you think they might have that idea? Where do you think that came from? Who do you think they got that from? And what do you think, their reasoning may have been? It's the same idea as like, who said it? Who does it benefit? And who's left out, or like whatever that series of questions is, to really look at like a text critically. It's a great life skill that needs to happen earlier and earlier to become savvy consumers of information.
And we're kind of like rooting ourselves in our job as being the people who ask the questions.
Yeah.
I mean, yes. I mean, we are going to talk a lot about like helping students learn how to ask questions like on the academic side, but I think on like the growth and right, learning how to be a person and how to be operating in this world, us being able to kind of like we talked about last week with Liz's book, know the kinds of questions we need to turn for that situation. I think that's really, really critical.
Yeah. And to further this conversation about Stamped specifically, we are very excited for you all to hear our, like we said before, our interview that's coming in the fall. It's not too far from now. It's like a month away with Dr. Kendi and Professor Gill, because hearing them talk about their like process and their understanding of what this book means and who it is for and its place in the world was just very, I know I have better words than this in my vocabulary, but it was so cool. Like, it was so cool.
I didn't know I needed it though, because I've read Stamped. Yeah. I've read the YA. I've read them, but I feel like I learned 1,000 new things reading through this version. So it's the book you didn't know you needed for real.
Truly, truly. And to go back to even just what we're talking about in a greater sense of graphic novels in general, or like, you know, graphic texts in general, the accessibility of the visuals are so helpful for our kids who are more visually inclined, and so important for our kids who are not visually inclined to help them stretch those boundaries of like understanding visual text. It's one of those things that what is good for some is good for all.
I'm in
the classroom. Yes. Okay. Friends, if you've not already picked up Stamped from the Beginning, the graphic history, you absolutely need to. So head to the show notes, make sure that you click on the linky link. This is not, I know that we've been super into audiobooks lately, but this is the opposite. This is actually, you have to have the text to be able to read it and get into that.
So we, this summer, we talked about it a little bit in our intro, are doing kind of a bucket list approach to our camp. And if you are reading along with us, that's awesome. But we also have a lot of other, a little bit lighter side of summer things are on that bucket list. And if you have not yet downloaded that, we want you to. So you're going to go to bravenewteaching.com/camp. Go grab the bucket list. Join us on social media as we are checking things off the list, filling our buckets, and just taking pictures and sharing with each other what we're up to. We would love to hear what the things are that are really moving you and rejuvenating you and making you feel good this summer, because tis the season to put yourself first again and really just lean into all your favorite things.
Well, and like, yes, on the flip side of something that's so intellectually fulfilling, there's also just the idea of like mind, body, soul fulfilling. So like one of the things on our bucket list is like, what's a new self-care habit that you can maybe try and see if it sticks, right? Has there anything that you have tried yet on that part of the bucket list, Amanda?
Taking my medicine.
Yeah, your ADHD meds.
But true. I mean, so that episode dropped a little while ago, and I think that really was one of the best self-care things I've done for myself in probably 25 years, which was go get myself evaluated. And now things are not that different, but like inside me, they are, like I think I've had a lot of good things. That's one. And it's definitely a habit I have to get into. Like your ADHD medicine doesn't come with a way to prevent the fact that when you have ADHD, you forget things all the time, like taking medicine.
Like taking your ADHD medicine. Okay.
So, but yes, I'd say that's right top of my list.
I don't have a very fancy self-care habit, and some people are going to be like, that's not self-care, to which I say, don't you judge me. But I am getting better into the habit of like truly doing like what people are calling on the TikTok a closing shift at my house.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Making it so that my house feels good. And it's not perfect. It's absolutely not perfect, but it is a habit that I am actively working on daily this summer to get into for next year, because I am very much, very, very susceptible to my physical environment affecting my mental state. Human beings are, period, but I am incredibly sensitive to it.
Do you play closing time while you do it?
No, you know what? I do play that. This is total bird walk. I play Closing Time. We play it in the theater at school when it's the end of a show and it's time for everyone to go home because I need to go night-night. I just blast Closing Time, and it's so funny because the students know exactly what it is. They don't even think I'm funny.
Time for you to go home.
But the parents have caught on that that's what I do, and they look and they like give me a salute. That's like, see you tomorrow. No, I pop on my headphones and my audiobook, and I'm trying to find like what the closing shift, as I'll just jump into that trend, looks like for my house on any given night. But like, I'm trying to get myself to a point of like, I do these things every single time and I do these things once a week, you know, just so that it's not this insurmountable, like, oh my God, mopping the floors takes me half a day because blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I talked to my therapist about something similar, and we decided that for right now, I should try to move any closing shift tasks that really need to get done to not the closing shift and to while I still am on my medication. So like, because
noon.
Another story for another day, but like I'm taking Concerta, right? So it's a stimulant, but it's a daily, right? It comes in and it goes out. It's in and out of your system in 10 to 12 hours. So like if I am really, I mean, eventually I'll get better at other things too, but I think about like, switching the laundry. I used to have that at like my before I go to bed kind of like, what? No, that has to happen like before dinner now.
Yes. So that then you can put everything away before you go to bed. Yes.
Yeah, right. No, the next day around 9, I can put everything away.
And the reason that to me feels like self-care is because I love my home. And curating a home that reflects that love that I feel for like my children growing up here and it being my safe place is absolutely a part of my own self-care. So caring for my home makes me feel good. Yes. Not caring for my home makes me feel equally bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
So bad feelings.
All right. Let us know, friends. First of all, pick up Stamped. Back to what we were actually talking about. Pick up Stamped. Pick up what sort of graphic texts are you willing to give a go to, even just to like read on your own if you want to give yourself a little like reading stretch, if that's not normally in your bag of tricks. Take a look at that. Let us know what you're looking at. Let us know when you've picked up Stamped because we want to hear what you think. We like it a lot.
We really do.
Yes.
We really do.
And that interview is coming in next month.
In the
it's
fall.
It's going to be good. Yes. Yeah. And again, head to the show notes for all of the things we've talked about, including our Can't Be NT bucket list. And let's see what sorts of things you put on your bucket list, friends. Thank you so much for joining us. And next week, we've got a whole nother book for you. Again, don't feel like you have to read right along with us. You can always come back to these things. But it's, good to have just in your cart somewhere so that when you're ready to click purchase, you already know what books you want.
Well, we know that like 95% of you get book recommendations from other people. So we're trying to stay some of those other people for you. So
yep,
that's
absolutely
what we're here for.
All right, friends, we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks again for listening to Brave New Teaching.
We'd love to keep the conversation going over on Instagram.
And while you're there, check out the links in our bio for the most up-to-date events going on in the Brave New Teaching community.
Thanks for being here and have a great week at school.